So, hello everyone. Thank you all so much for joining in today. My name is Teddy Huang. I am a historical flutist based in Mainz, Germany. And I'm also the founder of Teddy Talks Traverso, which is a platform for learning about historical flute playing. I have today the great honor of having Professor Eva Legêne on my series today. Professor Emeritus of Recorder at Indiana University, who's currently residing in Germany at the moment. And Ava, as we all call her, of course, has had an illustrious career of performing and teaching around the world, having taught at the Zweeling Conservatorium in Amsterdam, which then became the present Conservatorium van Amsterdam, the Royal Danish Academy of Music in Copenhagen, and as mentioned, the Historical Performance Institute at Indiana University, at the Jacob School of Music, which is where I met Ava as a young bachelor student. So for many of us, Ava has inspired and enriched our understanding of early music performance through her playing, her knowledge, through her love of teaching. If people wouldn't mind hitting the clapping emoji because we cannot clap live here, just to give Ava our warmest welcome, and also write in the chat if you care to do so. Write in the chat where you're tuning in from and what's your relationship with Ava. I think everyone would really appreciate that. So, Ava, herzlich willkommen, hartelijk willkommen. How are you doing?
I'm fine. Don't speak German, I get confused.
Okay, I won't do that. I won't confuse you. All right. And it just so happened to be that we actually played a concert together this last weekend. So Ava, I hope you could get some rest after having a full house at home for those days.
Sure.
Great. Okay. So Asa writes from Parkersburg, West Virginia. He obviously studied with you. Yonit, yes, studied with Ava at IU and currently in Ireland. Right. So, Emily Nye, Beloit, Wisconsin. Sorry, I don't pronounce that correctly.
Emily, yeah.
Yeah, many years studying with Ava at the Summer Recorder Player Seminar at Bloomington, Indiana. Beth, hi Beth, and still in Bloomington. All right. Anne Koenig from Phoenix, Arizona, and she says, "What a wonderful opportunity to see Ava again. She has been to Phoenix and also been on virtual classes with her. So fortunate. Oh, that's very nice. Okay. Um, a Francis. Hello, Ava was my recorder teacher while I was a doctoral student at IU while Binkley was
Yes.
there. Okay,
My
currently,
first.
yes. And Clara Amelia from Poland. And Ellen Jameson from England, also a student of
Ellen.
yours. Um, right. Okay, great. So really around the world, people are tuning in here, and thank you all very much for joining us. Okay, so we'll go ahead and we'll start first by talking briefly about your background, Ava, and then we'll get into yeah, your musical career later. So I'm gonna start now. Point. Okay, can everybody see that all right? All right, okay. So Ava, let's start by first again briefly talking about your family background. You grew up in a musical family in Holland. You have Danish and Dutch heritage, and you were surrounded by music literally the moment you were born. So tell us about your family. Who were the musicians or people who had musical connections?
No, first of all, hello everybody. It is wonderful to see you all and to know that you're there. So I wished you all were here in my living room so that we really could see each other very well. So yeah, I would like to say just before I start with my grandfather, who is sitting here between all his students, that I have really grown up in very contrasting surroundings. So from my father's side, my grandfather was a Moravian missionary who worked in Suriname. My father is also born there. So I really was all the time when I was with them in the Moravian kind of beautiful surroundings of Baroque squares that were in Zeist in Holland. And, you know, I would sit beside my grandmother in the white, beautiful Moravian church and listen to the sermons of my grandfather. So, and then from my mother's side, you can see it here. That is my grandfather and my grandmother. My grandmother was also a piano teacher, and there are four kids behind them. And my grandfather was really a completely different kind of non-religious and very artistic surrounding. And all of that, you know, the religious and the non-religious came together in my father and my mother. And so my father never instilled any kind of religious will on us. We simply just had to figure it out ourselves. But as a kind of compromise between my parents, we were sent to non-Orthodox schools with the Bible, as they were called in Holland, but very, very excellent schools. So, and we simply just had to figure things out ourselves. So those were really very, very big contrasts. And the other contrast between me and my surrounding as a young person was simply that all my girlfriends and people that I was together with had one sibling or two, but not more, had a homemaking mother. But, you know, we were in a family with 7 kids. And my parents were both freelance teachers in music. And my mother taught 48 hours a week. So the one who made the tea when the kids came home was my older sister and me for the kids. So there was really an enormous contrast for me between all these different ways in which people really form their lives. And I think it has been very interesting, but I also think it has been something that really has influenced me very, very much. So indeed, my family was a very big family. So let me just see again. I wrote everything down. So over 5 generations of musicians, there are 24 musicians in my family and one instrument builder. So many of the musicians of the direct line were then married to musicians again. So my joke is all the time, well, we are like the Bach family, we are just not that good. So, and then, so my great grandfather was a singer and a conductor. My grandfather had his own music school, and you saw the picture of that. And so he built a school, and already in 1919. So, and he made in the beginning his living as a pianist for silent films. And, you know, he built his music school from his life insurance that he had paid out. And so he was really extremely creative. And for example, in 1990, he performed Debussy's La Bois Joujou with his students. And Debussy had really performed that piece, premiered the piece the year before. So new music also has been an interest for my grandfather. So it was really, I loved this man extremely much. And whereas I heard the sermons of my grandfather from my father's side on Sundays, I heard my pianist grandfather would come to our town on Sundays and teach me the piano. So, and then my mother went into the conservatory when she was 16 with piano. My father studied organ, and after the war, he started then also studying organ building. So he became a designer for organs for Flentrop, and he restored organs as well. I grew up with the contrast between the Buxtehude from my father's organ and the Chopin and Schumann from my mother's piano. So there was always this contrast also between the music that I was hearing and the way in which my parents were working with music. My father was already involved in early music before the war. And my mother was really playing Chopin, Schumann, and the Bach Italian concert as well. But otherwise, it was really a contrast between those two musics as well. And then you can see the picture. My big love as a kid was dancing. I danced ballet for 10 years, from 10 to 20. When I went to The Hague to the conservatory, I had to stop. But I really loved ballet. It was a wonderful time for me and a wonderful way of having something for myself. And so in the high school, I performed 3 times. This is the first time as Peter in the Wolf, where I was Peter. And then I danced the Sorcerer's Apprentice, where I was the apprentice. And then also later the headmistress in the Kadettenball. So I love this, and still today, really modern ballet is my great, great love. So I go to every performance I can of the Dutch Dance Theater and to the Stuttgart Ballet. And, at IU, I want to mention that we had Pierre Bonnefou there, who was a fantastic French dancer with beautiful choreography that he made. And I was extremely fond of him. He died for 2 weeks ago. So, but modern ballet is really one of my big, big things.
So this is your mother?
Yeah, that is my mother
Mother
working
with kids.
with kids, also in a performance, and one of my sister, the sister number, the fifth child of my parents, is sitting there. You can see her facing us. Then all the kids in my family were taught the recorder, so everybody played the recorder, but then all the other 5 played also another instrument.
You had told me a story of listening to Benedictine monks. Would you mind,
Yeah,
as
yeah, that, yeah,
a deep inspiration for you for the rest of your life? Would you
it
mind
really
sharing that
was.
story?
So what happened was that I must have been about 10 or something, and my father woke me up in the middle of the night. And he said to me, I'm going to dress you as a boy. You have to act like a boy, and didn't tell me anything else. So he put me in the car and he drove me through the night to a monastery, a Benedictine monastery. And was going to listen to the Matin, where the monks would sing, as he was at that time studying Gregorian song. So it was really, for me, he put me in the back of the chapel, as there were no women allowed in the chapel, but he kind of did his thing and put me in the back of the chapel. And I still remember that moment, or the time when I was listening to these monks and could see my father sit in the front of the chapel. And for me, I think that unconsciously, I really realized the deep, deep roots, the deep spiritual roots of music. And it has followed me all of my life. That I've always been looking for it in music. And I really think that that one experience has really opened something up that was very important. So I have been my father very grateful for his thing. I always also thought, why didn't he take my older sister? But she had braids, so he couldn't take her.
Right. And what fate would have it, you end up working with many musicians who share that deepness and spirituality in their music. Let's talk about some of these people.
Mhm.
So obviously, like I was saying, you have learned and also worked with numerous musicians who have had lasting influence in the early music movement, and also at a very exciting time in Holland or in
Mhm.
Europe in general, where early music was so new and also challenged the many traditions of classical music playing. We unfortunately have only time to talk about a couple of them. Let's start with Gustav Leonhardt. And
Mhm.
you wanted me to especially include this photo of him. Would you mind telling us about Gustav?
Yeah, that is in his garden. So behind his house, Gustav Leonhardt was living in one of the very, very beautiful houses, the Bartolotti house in Amsterdam from 1617. So, and he was living in the back house. It was a double house, and he was living in the one in the back. That was from the 18th century. So Gustav Leonhardt was really, for me, kind of the incorporation of the Baroque era. So you know, everything about him was the details of the Baroque. And, you know, there was an inscription of the house, and it said, so in Latin, through ingenuity and diligence. And I think in a way that really describes him. So it was really an inscription on the house from 1600 something. And I really think that described him as he was meticulous in everything, all the details, in everything Baroque music, Baroque art. So in his house, his beautiful collection of instruments, the beautiful collection of Baroque art that you still can see on the internet by Sotheby's. So it was an astounding collection that he had. So, but it was his detailed and his very sincere way of looking at everything that really made the people who worked with him, and you know, especially Frans Brüggen, who really was very honest and said that he had learned everything from Gustav Leonhardt. So, and had this saying of, with Gustav Leonhardt, you come very far in the arts. So Leonhardt was really actually the influencer of that generation of Frans Brüggen, and so Frans Brüggen, of course, also of us.
Thank you. I'll ask you to comment a little bit more about Leonhard. But now I'd like to do kind of an exercise for everyone. I'll now play a recording from Leonhard. It's a sarabande from Jean-Philippe Rameau. And I'll invite Ava to give her reaction afterwards. And for our fellow audience, feel free to write in the chat and share your feelings about the recording that you'll be hearing. And again, like I said, I was thought to use this as kind of an exercise in um, deep listening, if you would. So try to listen in a really concentrated way. Imagine having your ears really wide open, um, and perhaps try to experience music as something beyond sound. Yeah, so it's some there is it's beyond the medium itself. Or imagine if you were to play yourself, you know, can you kind of actually feel an inner sensation? So yeah, just try to really get into the music, get into the sound somehow, and see what you experience. Okay. Okay, Ava, how Um, how do you think this recording reflects the Gustav Leonhardt you know?
Yeah, it is, you know what I said, it is the sincerity, it is the poetry, um, it is really the sound that the instrument is making, which, you know, in my time still was very, very new. We hadn't heard that time. We were used to Neuberts, and, you know, Skovonek was the first person to really make these instruments. So Leonard was really the person who kind of brought that sound of the harpsichord to us as a much more singing instrument, and an instrument with a lot of resonance also. So So, and it is his in-depth going into the resonance of the sound, the way in which he articulates, and the fingerings of all of that. So it is simply the details. And I have one example of that that I really found remarkable. He wrote a book about the Bartolotti house and the people who had been living in it since 1600 something. And at one point, he really is writing that he is upset about the fact that in Amsterdam, the churches and the buildings at night are being lighted up with spotlights. Since when you do that, the shades of the windows and the windowsills goes the wrong way. They go upward. And he writes, and the architects never had thought that to be in that way. The shade should go down from the sun. And that is really Gustav Leonhardt in a nutshell. This incredible detailed thinking of everything. So I've been with him in museums, and where he went into the details on everything. It's so really remarkable with a lot of knowledge also.
That's really incredible to hear. Do we have any audience reactions on the recording? I can also share that I agree with you, Eva. You feel this incredible deepness in his playing. And what particularly draws me is, for example, how the ornamentation is not there to simply have a lot of notes, but they have a musical function, a purpose. And the arpeggiations are not just notes, but you feel them as kind of swirls of energy. This is what I'm talking about, like not hearing music beyond sounds, but to experience, sound as energy, or how, a mordant lifts up a melody, and the inagal is lingering, but also forward moving at the same time. So it's not just sound, but also movement and gestures, and on all of this coming from a very deep place, of course, also contributing to in relation to the quality of the sound and the instrument that he had.
So what I also think is very important is that he was an organist. So and he was not only an organist who sometimes played the organ, but he was a real organist. So he really the depth of the organ also is part of his playing. And I think that is also an extremely important side of him. So the one thing that I can also tell is that so he also really thought outside the box. So he got the Erasmus Prize for the recordings of the Bach cantatas together with Harnoncourt. And they had to use half of their money, prize money, for cultural purpose. So Harnoncourt told the audience that he was going to use his money for making a facsimile urtext of Mozart's works. Then Leonhardt came and told everybody, the queen on the first row, that his money would go to the women in the red light district. As he said, Amsterdam's red light district is part, and these women are part of the culture of Amsterdam. And his church, the Waalse Kerk, where he really was an organist, was in the middle of the red light district. And he said these women need the help. So his money went there. And that is really a way of showing also how he was really thinking outside the box. And was really very surprising also in the way in which he could talk to you also.
That's a great story. Wow,
Yeah.
very inspiring
So
to hear.
the other thing I asked him, he did 150 concerts a year. So I asked him why he was an organist and also was teaching at the conservatory. And his answer was that it was his only way to keep in touch with reality. So, and I found that also really very, very as a very point, yeah, what do you call it in English? A really very, very strong answer. If you are playing 150 concerts, that is your only reality is the music. So, but to be with students, to be in the church, that was simply his reality, and that was very, very nice to hear.
That's great. So we have a couple of reactions from the audience here. Tom says, such flexible time and independence of the hands. And Koenig writes, agree, the sense of timing. So it was a time, free, flexible, moving, swirling. Beth writes, it takes a lot of breath control to play that piece that slowly and a strong ankles to dance it.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that, Beth.
Uh-huh.
And Emily Nye writes, I need to listen to more of his recordings. Yeah, so I can think we can all agree with that. Yeah, there's certainly something very deeply inspiring in many different ways
Mhm.
of his recordings. Okay, great. Let's move on to the Kuijkens. Now, these are the Kuijkens. If for people who might not know, it's a family of Belgian brothers of early music, with Bartel Kuijken on the Traverso, Sigiswald on the violin, and also the viola da spalla, and Wieland on viola da gamba and cello. Now, Eva, you played with Wieland for 50 years together.
Yes. Mhm.
Here's a photo of you together with Hopkins and Smith on the lute. What did you learn from those years? What did you learn from playing together with Wieland?
Yeah, so with the Kuijkens, if you ask me what is the difference between the Kuijkens and Leonhardt and Brüggen, I would say that the Kuijkens were playing much more intuitively. They were all modern musicians before they went to early music, although they always had played early music also, but they were really in modern ensembles. They played new music, and so in the Kuijkens, there was much more of the contrast between Buxtehude and Chopin, and Schumann. And I really felt that that was one of the differences between them. And I met Wieland and Sigiswald the first time in 1967. It was my last year of conservatory studies. It was 2 months before I had to do my soloist degree. And they were teachers at a workshop that lasted several weeks, where people like Harnoncourt and Leonhardt and his wife, Harnoncourt and his wife also, Raphael Puana was there, Kurt Redel, who was a Bach conductor, Eugène Dambois, who was Hop Smith's teacher, and Walter Berkman, who was a recorder player and harpsichordist in England. Frans Brüggen was there, and then the Kuijkens were there, and they were very young, and they were there really a lot. And in my first lesson with them, I played a prelude by Louis Couperin, and Sigiswald came with the famous remark that he said, I can just about stomach Frans Brüggen, but people who imitate him, I can't stand. That was what he said to me. But that was very normal in those days, that also in my lessons with Frans Brüggen, everybody was extremely frank. And it was not meant as a mean way or intimidating way, but it was simply meant as having a dialogue. And so we were used to that tone. We were used to being criticized like that. And so I said to Wieland, okay, to Sigiswald, you can say that to me, but then you have to tell me what to do, as I have to play my soloist degree in 2 months or something, and I simply need to know then what you think I should do. And then he said, okay, you have to go and listen to singers. And that was for me extremely interesting, since Frans Brüggen had been saying to me that I was singing too much and that I should be more instrumentalist. Whereas the Kuijken brothers told me in this lesson, you are not singing enough. And that was really extremely interesting for me, as then Sigiswald took me to singers and made me hear all kind of things, criticized them, told me, can you hear what they are saying? So he really taught me all these different ways of listening to singers. And for me, that was when Buxtehude and Schumann came together. That I was allowed to let Schumann sing in the way that he had always been singing in me, and that I could do that, and that I still could be an early musician. And so for me, it was really an incredible change, and I have been them eternally grateful for that. So. And then, with Wieland, already at that workshop, he started accompanying me, and I was in heaven. I simply was in heaven. That playing of his, you know, I learned how important the bass line was, how much influence a bass line actually has on your playing. I have once heard Bart Kuijken say to Wieland, Wieland, if you want it green, it is going to be green. And by that he meant that Wieland could simply, from the bass line, decide how the top line was going to play. And that also really means that you need not only to know your bass line, but you only need to know how you want the bass line to be played, so that you can simply play on the bass line with your own melody line in the way that you want that to be heard. And I really with Wieland those, and so he accompanied me, or he played the bass line in the last concert. And I remember I was really in heaven. And there was a psychologist who later told me that if you have had that experience, of really this feeling of complete, paradise, then when you are playing, you can simply recall that feeling. And you can simply all the time use that as a way of helping yourself. And Wieland's wife once said to me, Eva, you shouldn't you shouldn't play with Wieland anymore, as when he's not there, you're going to miss him too much. And that was true. But in the concert, I could always imagine he was there, and that I could simply call that feeling again of just being carried by the bass line. So I can't say to musicians enough, learn your bass line and know what you want to do with it, as that is actually what your melody line is going to do. So and then, the Kuijkens came to Denmark. We did workshops on a very regular basis. We played concerts together. Sigiswald had too much to do, but Bart came also when he was old enough to come. And, it was really it was such a beautiful time for me to have them there and to have their support in Denmark. And it was really great. And so Wieland and I, we played our last concert in a concert tour in the United States, where we played 12 concerts actually in 2014. And Wieland after that kind of retired.
You must feel very fortunate to have
I was
those
extremely fortunate.
experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah. So being a platform about traversal playing, I thought to play a recording of the Kuijken brothers together with Lucy van Daal playing the C major Mozart flute quartet. I will just play one short clip due to time concerns. And so this is just a short clip from the theme and variations of the quartet. And once again, let's see if we can practice some deep listening, and let's hear what these musicians have to say. So for me personally, especially coming from modern flute, the Mozart flute quartets can be easily considered as simple music or easy music. And I especially also chose the C major quartet here because oftentimes players only focus on the D major quartet, and the other ones they consider as not mature works, or not as complete as the D major one. But I really feel that the technical finesse required to play those simple phrases elegantly, working with soft dynamics and creating subtle nuances in, again, these simple notes, if you would. That's what I find so inspiring about their playing. And again, it's about creating depth and beauty by going beyond what's written on the page. Ava, what do you think?
Um, well, it is again, in this case, the Kuijken, Wieland, and Sigiswald are just accompanying Bart. So it is, of course, mainly Bart's playing, and so how can I say that? So Bart also studied with Frans Brüggen for a short while, and the Kuijken brothers had told me that they had told Bart that he should only take from Frans Brüggen what he thought was necessary, and the rest he should forget. So, so there was a way of what Sigiswald said to me. He could just stomach Frans Brüggen. So it was a way of the playing that simply went a little against their own musical concepts. So and with Bart, you can hear that he wants also to be himself. He. What I said, that he did not want Wieland to decide how he should play. He was the youngest of 6 brothers, so he had all these other brothers ahead of us, above him. And so I think also that so for Bart, he really always is looking for his own way of doing things. That is for me one of the very typical things of him, actually.
Well, I still think they, even though it's just accompaniment, they obviously accompanied him exquisitely
Yeah,
and
uh,
very
sure.
sensitively.
He
Here
couldn't
you
get it
are.
better.
And as some people have reflected in the chat as well, also the same words, exquisite.
Mhm.
All right. Then, lastly, we come to Frans Brüggen, who you studied recorder with.
Yes.
Obviously, a legendary name in the early music world as a recorder player, as a conductor. You had mentioned in our conversation that back in the days, early music was parallel to new music. People were researching and experimenting, and everything was new, and there was that parallel between early music and new music. And my impression is Brügge also had some kind of a should I say, rebel aspect in him, which I think somehow shows up in this photo, with him kind of squatting, squatting on the ground with a cigarette in his hand. Let's actually do a little different now. I'll play 2 clips of Brüggen playing both modern and early music, and then again, I'll invite you, Ava, to the floor. So the first clip is of Brüggen playing Berrios Gesti, which was also dedicated to Brüggen. Okay, stop it right about here. And now just a section from the Telemann Fantasy in B minor. stop here, unfortunately. Okay, with those two clips, modern music and Baroque music, what do you say? What do you have to say about Frans Brüggen, Eva?
Yeah, well, the first thing I just want to say is that Berio is an extremely difficult piece to play, as he makes it he separates the tongue, the voice, and the fingers. So and then through the whole piece, so in the beginning you could see that Frans was doing something with his fingers, but at the same time he did something with his tongue and with his voice. So and everything is notated separately. And then throughout the piece, at the very end, everything comes together. So, and then you get normal playing again. So that is a very, very difficult piece we need to play. And then with the Fantasia, you know, that is typical Frans, but there he's playing on the first, really the first copy of a original recorder. So that was really also the very exciting thing in 1967. That was when Kolsma started copying instruments, and also Skovornek started doing that with recorder. So, so you know, it was an extremely exciting time then. So let me just go back to my notes. So Frans Brüggen, as I said, was number 9 of 9 children, and I was the second of 7 children. And simply from the very beginning, we could recognize something in at each other. You know, as you get when you are in a big family, you get a sixth sense. You know, you're always watching people. You're always really involved in other people, and I could see that by Frans Brüggen right away. And I guess he also could recognize that in me, that so it gives you a particular sense. And that was very interesting. And then indeed what you said, that he was rebellious, but you have to think about that Frans Brüggen's generation, he was 6 years younger than Gustav Leonhardt, but his generation were small kids during World War II in Amsterdam, you know, which was a terrible time. So that generation of kids came out of the war really being traumatized. And so it had an incredible influence on their lives. You know, and then that generation, like in the United States and everywhere over Europe, started making their protest when they were in their late 20s, early 30s. So it was the protest, you know, in Amsterdam it was called the Provost, from provocation. And, you know, they had these non-violent demonstrations, so against everything, you know, the Vietnam War, the anti-establishment, yeah, anti-capitalist, everything was there in that time. So that was the time that I studied with Frans, and there's this very as a what is it, remark by Frans Brüggen. I have to read it for you, but it says, the ideal of bourgeois coziness is a room with a fireplace with a nice burning fire. I rather see the room burning. So that was Frans Brüggen, you know. And then also he was part of not only the provocation movement, the provost, but he also was part of the notenkrakers. So the nutcrackers, noten in Dutch is also the notes. So the notes crackers, and these were a group of composers, young composers, who simply wanted the new music to be brought to a broad audience. So they also made an action where they came into the Concertgebouw Orchestra, and when Bernard Haitink wanted to start the conducting, they all had children's instruments and tried to disturb the performance with all their noise. They were carried out of the Concertgebouw, but it had some effect, as one of the things that people started really understanding was that new music and early music had a social aspect, which was that it was not elite. So in the new music and in the early music, there were really amateurs very much involved in all of that. So the Dutch government really saw it also as two social movements and started subsidizing it. So and also the studies of all of this. So it really was the atmosphere in which I grew and in which I was studying in The Hague. You know, rebellious but incredible fun, new music, all these people who came, No, Berio, Louis Andries, Peter Schat of the composers, and then the early music department with, you know, the new recordings with the original instruments, the film with Leonhardt playing, and, you know, about Anna Magdalena Bach, one of the films that Leonhardt played Bach in, actually, you know, and all the original instruments. It was an extremely exciting time, but you can't take the modern music, the avant-garde time there from the early music. It really went hand in hand. So, and for me, it was actually wonderful since I always have felt that I have to be involved in new music, since otherwise I would feel too much like being a person who is dusting off all the things in the museums.
So he also taught new music in his lessons.
Excuse
Or
me?
did he also teach new music in
Oh
his
yeah, oh
lessons?
yeah. I played several. So the Berio we were not allowed to play yet, as he had his personal rights on the piece for 4 years. As he ordered all those pieces. You know, he made the commissions, and he even tried to get a work by Stravinsky. He got Stravinsky on the phone, but then Stravinsky very nicely declined. So, but you know, he tried it. So he had the Japanese composers write for him. He really did everything, and as far as we were allowed to play the pieces, he made us play them too.
That's amazing. So what would you say, would you mind sharing you know, your lessons with Brüggen? What was his point?
So yeah, so let me just see. I studied as a piano major as well the first 2 years at the conservatory. And when I then transferred to Brugge, he made me stop the piano. As he said, you will need all your time to practice the recorder. So the atmosphere in the lessons was really beautiful. So he was adamant about getting back to the origin of the instruments and the roots of the music. And you know, in my lessons, I would always be the last student. In the late afternoon, he would not turn on the light, and you know they were smoking in their lessons still in that time. And I can remember still that I was playing everything by heart, and you know on the piano I could see his cigarette, and you know, and then the tip of his cigarette burning there in the dark room. But it was just absolutely fascinating, and he was a fascinating teacher also. He played duets with me from the very beginning, and I was not allowed to play a mistake. None of his students were allowed to play a mistake. I still can remember the one mistake I made in all his lessons, and you were not allowed to have a technical glitch with your instrument. So if you played a mistake or you had a glitch, you had not practiced enough. So you were also so expected to figure out yourself why you had that glitch. And then he let his students play his own repertoire, and that was really extremely interesting. Also, since I then knew how he would do his interpretation, and we would discuss it. And then I would be able to go to the concerts and especially hear what Leonard was doing in his continuo playing, how he was never, you know, playing the melody instrument out of the room, how he was always uh, adjusting his dynamics, his chords. It was every time different. And how Anne Baalsma played his bass lines. I love those concerts, but I had already then played the repertoire with Frans Brüggen. And then he was also, as a person, very intent on the well-being of his students. So at one point, he asked me to go and check on one of his students that he thought had problems, and indeed she had. So, and I checked on her, and he asked me to help her. And then also personal care, if I just can tell an anecdote, as it is so typical of him. So I came to a lesson, and he said to me, I want you to go and see a film with Vanessa Redgrave. It was a very leftist film, so an English film. And he said, I want you to go and see that. And I said to him, I'm sorry, I can't do that. When I am in the cinema and it gets dark, I get claustrophobia. I simply can't do it. I can't be in the cinema. I haven't been it since I was 8 years old. And then he said to me, he wasn't buying it. And he said to me, well, I'm sorry, you have to go and see that film. And if you haven't seen it next week, you have no lesson. You won't get a lesson. So I went to Bruce Haynes, who he had put me in already in my first lesson. He had brought me in contact with Bruce, and Bruce and I, we were playing all the time together. And I went to Bruce and I told him what had happened. And then Bruce said, okay, we'll go and bring you to the cinema and we'll help you through it. And then there was another Mexican harpsichordist, and they were both sitting at my side holding my hand, and I got through it. And for not believing it, it was a film by Ingmar Bergman at night, as then you could go for free to an Ingmar Bergman festival.
Okay.
So we saw The Seventh Seal by Ingmar Bergman. And, I got through it. And then Bruce and I went to see the film with Vanessa Redgrave. And I could go back to Frans Brüggen and tell him, but you know why he did that? I came from this religious background, you can say. And I came from a small town. So I think that he really he thought that I had to open up, that I had to simply know more about life normally, more in general. And I think that he opened that up for me. And so, and that is again, that is an incredible way of looking at your student, and simply, without being too intrusive, although this was intrusive, to say, okay, this is necessary, and you do it.
So he knew what the student needed and tried, well, not tried, but basically forced you to confront yourself in
Yeah,
that way.
yeah, but it was good for me. It was really good for me, and also the fact that I could get over at least the claustrophobia there was very important also. If I should tell you about my first lesson, for example, that is, he put me together with Bruce already. I said, I have this American student, please start working with him. And Bruce was also not allowed to practice oboe. He could only practice the recorder. So, and then he told me, and I also found that a very nice way. He said to me, well, I can change everything that I want to change in your teaching right away, or I can do it along the way. No, and what do you want? He said to me. And then I said, well, do it right away. That's better. And then I asked him about vibrato. And as I had gotten in my 2 years of recorder study before with one of his students, I had gotten the idea of the diaphragm vibrato. I knew that, but I couldn't get his particular vibrato, which I really loved. And so I said to him, so can you tell me how you do that? And he was just sitting beside me and doing it, and I got it. And I, I don't know how, I must have heard something in what he did that simply told me how then to use my diaphragm vibrato or my diaphragm breathing on that. And at the same time, it was also a thing that I think is very important. It was the mezzo di voce. So the mezzo di voce is playing a crescendo and a decrescendo on the tone, and which is really the basis of all good music making. So I told you about Cecilia Bartoli, who in a performance or in an interview demonstrated just the most incredible a mezzo di voce, and she did it without vibrato in that time. If you want to hear it, I found one clip of her that is called the longest breath, or the world's longest breath with her, where she simply sings a mezza di voce, but she uses a vibrato that she has to use to be able to do what she's doing. But you still can hear the mezza di voce in a fantastic way. So, and that is really the basis of all recorder playing. And I know that, you know, I asked my students in the beginning when they came, can you play me a long A? And I know how bothered they were by that. But it is really, really the basis of playing good wind instruments, you know.
Well,
So,
make sure to
so
give
and
me,
then he,
yeah, make sure to give me the link afterwards, and we can put it in the video description so
yeah,
people can go
yeah.
ahead and listen to that.
And then you know he also really taught me to use my body as my soundboard, you know. So for example, he talked about the resonance and where the resonance was, but I could simply hear it by sitting beside him. I could hear his resonance, and I could go home and simply just look for it, find it. And then also he taught me that, which I found a beautiful picture actually. He told me, so see your lungs as a balloon, but when you blow out, don't feel that the air is escaping the balloon, but blow out so that you feel that you're filling the balloon up. And that is a beautiful way of talking about support, actually. And again, it gives you that feeling of this growing. And you know, Brüggen always did this with his arms when he was playing. You know, he would lift up his arms, and we always said that is the bellow, you know, of the organ, which that he used in that way. So, and then he used his breathing system as the one that also Arnold Jacobs in the United States used. So Arnold Jacobs was the tuba player of the Chicago Symphony, and he was very famous for his breathing technique and his teaching of that. And his breathing technique was that you will never go to the end of your breath. You will always keep a fourth of your capacity in your lungs. And only when you have a long rest can you really let that go. But it is all the time of refilling, like with a car, you know, when you get into the red on your gas meter, you fill it up. And that is the same. You keep a fourth of your capacity in your lungs, and then you fill up all the time. And you can see it in Brüggen's playing, for example, or you can hear it, that when he does, for example, a B section of a sonata, he has played a breath when he starts, and already three bars after, when it was not necessary, he takes a breath again. It is this refilling so that you all the time can play on you know, a full tank actually.
So without being at the bottom already. So you're always,
Yeah, you never go
you
to the
always
end.
have reserve.
Yeah,
So
you always, and it keeps also it keeps your rib cage extended, and it keeps your what is it, your support in place. So there's actually also a book about that. It's called Arnold Jacobs, The Legacy of a Master, and it was put together by D. Stewart from IU, and it is also in Indiana Press. So Indiana University Press. So, but a very, very interesting book in which his technique is actually explained by other people as he. So Arnold Jacobs himself, only there's a lecture of him in the book, but otherwise he would not write it down since it is too individual for everybody, I think, the breathing. So, and then if I go from breathing to tonguing, he, in his first lesson, Brüggen pointed out one 16th note on a whole page with notes, and he said to me, if you can't think how you are going to play this one 16th note, don't aspire to become a Baroque musician. And I can remember I thought, and how in the hell am I going to do that, you know? But then he taught me, and the first thing that was a demand was I could not use double tonguing, as double tonguing just was boring. Everything sounded the same. He wanted me really to practice to play as possible and as fast as possible, but with a variety of tonguings. And then, you know, later, it was first at the end of my studies, Hotatere was published, and also On Playing the Flute by Quans was published. And then we got really to see what the tonguings actually were. And so we tried it out in my lessons to see what we actually were doing and how much it was in accordance with what Hotatere had been saying. And we found out we did exactly the same as Hotatere had been saying. And that really tells you that the music tells you how you should articulate. It is not Hotatere's rules that tell you how to articulate, but Hotatere wrote down what the music dictated how you should do it. And so that was really for us an incredible discovery, actually, that we were doing things right, you know. So, and then the other thing also that Frans Brüggen really taught me was the essence of early music, you know, the meaning of the words, not only the words itself, but the meaning of the words, and then also the rhythm of the words. So the instrumental articulation as if you were articulating words. So, and you know, the expression of the poetry of the music. He was extremely poetic in his playing, I think. So, and then so I had really I was really very lucky to be able to attend his last rehearsal in his life, which was at the conservatory in The Hague, where he was doing a Rameau project with students and their teachers who were all in his orchestra of the 18th century. And in that rehearsal, I heard him say to the players, okay, there are three things in music. It is melody, it is harmony, and it is rhythm, articulation. And then the whole orchestra answered, and the most important is articulation, you know, and it was really wonderful to hear them say that in that way. So it really is, you know, as articulation is simply what gives the expression to the music. So
Yeah.
so and so and I just want, if I'm allowed to talk about Paul Elliott, as that brings me also to another way. So Paul Elliott is the tenor who was in the Hilliard Ensemble and before that in other ensembles in England. And if you listen to his singing, which I recommend very, very highly, you can simply hear how he pronounces all the words. And not only the words, but how he pronounces all the consonants. And that is where we as instrumentalists can learn so much from him. So when the word really demands an emphasis, he will make the M of the beginning of the word longer, or the P longer, or the T longer, or he will, when it is a passing word, he will make it very short. He will simply make the sound of the consonant dark. He will make the sound of the consonant light. He is absolutely a master in that. And I've been thinking, how did he learn that? And you know what? He has been a kid who sang in the choir in St. Paul's Cathedral in London. And he learned it simply in that acoustics. So that acoustics really demands of you that you speak your words in that way. And so I recommend for everybody, listen to Paul Elliott and listen to the way in which he pronounces that, and that you really get that feeling. And that then brings me to acoustics, you know. So, and the tempo in acoustics. So, is it okay to go on with that, or do you
Well,
want?
I think we're a little bit short on time, and I do want to talk about what we have originally planned, and also about rhythm and affect, if that's okay. And there are a couple. I see one question here. If you wouldn't mind answering, Ava. Emily has a question. What make of recorder? So, what recorder did you have when you were studying with Brüggen? Some recorders are glitchy. So did you had access to good instruments when you
Yeah, I had a
played
I had a Kolsma.
Brüggen?
but it was still a modern Kolsma. And at the end of my studies, I got one of the copies of a Brezon. So one of those first copies.
Okay. Great. And Christian says, I find that when I have to perform a hard trill in a phrase that is succeeded by a long note, it's much harder to keep my breath for this long note, like on the fifth bar of the E minor sonata by J.S. Bach. How do you approach breathing when you have long notes? How do you decide where exactly to breathe?
Yeah, so that is simply this refilling thing. So most players think about, okay, for here I need a big breath, but you have to start already filling up much earlier, so that actually you have breath enough when you come to that place. So too many people are simply just thinking, okay, here I need a big breath, but that is not the way in which it works. You should simply build up. So I have this system of big and small breathing marks. So where I know I take a quick breath, where I know I can take a larger breath, and then I have the breath with a sign in it of be careful here. You know, so you have to simply build your breathing up. And in Bach, that is absolutely necessary. If you try to take only a breath so that you can have breath enough for that time, then you don't have breath enough. You have to build it up like that. So make sure that you know where in the phrasing before that you can already take breath so that you are filled up when you actually get to that spot.
I would also like to add to breathe with everything you have, so to speak. So don't forget also you can use your nose to breathe, and in that way you can take quicker, shorter breaths. And that way, that will help you to tank up along the way and not relying on only the places where you have where you can breathe. We can breathe larger. So you with the sniffing you can tank up along the way and much more efficiently than waiting for those places where you take a big breath.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Eva, I'm sorry, we will have to move on because I want to deliver what we promised here. So in connection with what you learned from Brüggen, let's talk just very briefly about affect and rhythm. So first of all, for those who might be unfamiliar with Baroque music, think of affect as simply an emotion. Yeah, and we can talk about a general affect of a piece, or we can talk about a specific affect in a particular phrase, in an ornament, and also affect in rhythm. So you see here, the left side is a list of affects by the music theorist Marburg, and also drawings by Lebrun of facial expressions showing the passion of the soul. That's the title of that publication. So you see sadness, jealousy, anger. So Eva, would you mind telling us why is it important to understand the concept of affect in earlier music?
Well, in a way, it is important in all music, of course, you know. So
Sure.
the emotion in music but it has changed from being in Baroque music a general feeling. You know, so I always said to my students, you know, especially the pre-college students who were afraid of showing their feelings, you know, the feelings in Baroque music are not reading in your diary. You know, they are general feelings that everybody can recognize. Whereas when you get to Beethoven, those are really his own personal feelings that, you know, that are then individualized. So that is one of the ways that then the composers tried to find a way in Baroque music to express all these different emotions. And, Marpurg was really a nerd, by making so many different effects. So Monteverdi is talking only about three effects, but the idea of effect and rhythm go all the way back to the Romans, actually, to Quintilian, who wrote about that in his book on rhetoric already. And it goes together with, if you can show the next chart, with the rhythms. So it goes together with that, all the verse feet. So the verse feet are the rhythms of which words are made up. So you have all these different rhythms that you can see. So the rhythm of the long, long, the rhythm of the short, 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 long, short, long, short, 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 long, and so on. So you have all these different combinations of long and short syllables in the words. And then at the same time, also the Victorians put that together with affect. So if it was ta-da, it was kind of violent, it was kind of lively, and we don't say shut up, we don't say that, we say shut up. So also in our language, although things go pretty much together. So and then the long, short, short, long, short, short was really going along and flowing. The long, short is very much used for things that are sleepy. So the long, long is really very, very sad. So every rhythm has a emotion that is then being expressed. And that was really what you can do with your tonguing also, but that you have to recognize. You have to recognize it in the music, that these particular rhythms express this particular word. So the best way to learn it is to look at the scores of Bach's cantatas and simply see how the words are expressed in the music by him. So you have to be a little careful with English translations, as very often then the word doesn't have the same meaning as the German, but in principle, you can see how he uses all these different rhythms and the slurrings and things for expressing the rhythm of the word. And if you know that, I have made comparisons between his instrumental music, so Bach's instrumental music, and then flute sonatas, and then how I would put words on the articulation of the melody line, and it works. It completely works, and you have very, very many options. And that is also in Baroque music, and what Frans Brüggen taught me, that you always have to decide on which options you choose. It is like fingering on the harpsichord. If you all the time take different fingerings, if you all the time take different articulation, when you are on stage and you have to play, your mind gets confused. So you simply have to know what you're doing. That is one of the things with Baroque music. You have 120 options, so you simply just have to decide, tonight it is going to be this.
Yeah. I want to share that when I took Ava's course at Indiana University, this thing about affect and rhythm is something that really fascinated me, because it wasn't, at that point, I had never thought about music in this way. And excuse me, I never thought about that, how different rhythms can convey different emotions, and that, I didn't think about why composers would choose certain rhythms over others in a particular instance, and that there was actually meaning to them. And I would also like to add that obviously the list or the descriptions that you see here, they are general tendencies, and there can also be many nuances to them depending on the musical passage. So just for those who are, if you want to study taking musical passages and comparing it with this chart, just to keep that in mind. So these are tendencies, and there are always different subtle flavors to them as well. And so, for example, we have this last movement of the Telemann G minor fantasy. We see this motive that comes back a bit again, the short da-da-dum, yeah, the Anapest. It's not so important that you know the terms of these, but just, with this kind of rhythm, the ta-da-dum, and which according to Mersenne kind of excites listeners, yeah, or actually excites listeners' anger. So it's something active, or it can be something fierce, yeah. So some action, and whereas the trochee, the long short dee da dee dum, so they are often representing tenderness. If you have repeated short notes like these ones here, they are often then used to show lightness or maybe something funny, perhaps. So by looking at rhythm, we can already get a lot of information about the expressions, about the emotions involved.
Yeah. Can I just
Sure.
send, oh well, but the other one, so the second anapest that you have there is being slurred. So that means it is just a broken chord that you have to kind of just let go. So but it is still the yadadam. So
Right.
okay.
And this is the kind of the nuances we're talking about. That
Yeah.
within each type, there can
Mhm.
be different flavors. Um, Thank you. And here, from another Telemann fantasy in D major, and I wanted to show this because of this pickup here. It's kind of a danger that this becomes a triplet. That when you're playing, if you're not careful, this can easily sound like a triplet, but it's not a triplet. So it's dum dee da dum, like kind of slowly dissected. So you just make sure when you're playing that to be aware of that. And it's again this long, short, short pattern. And if we did a triplet, it would reduce the effect of the dactyl affect, which according to Marburg can be joking. Yeah. And here's also more examples of that anapest, so that, kind of action. And one extreme example is from J.S. Bach's St. John Passion, where in this number, the mob is screaming, crucify, crucify, Kreuzige in German, which Kreuzige in itself is a dactyl, so the dum bottom, yeah. So this play of the dactyl and the anapest, we can really feel the violence also in the rhythm.
Yeah.
At our
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, did you want to say something about the Bach?
Well, but it is also that you always, so in those figures of long, short, short, you always have to think about if it is a dactyl or if it is an anapest. So for the word Corsica, it certainly is an anapest, but in music, otherwise, it's in instrumental music where you don't have the guidance of the words. You just have to think about if it is long, short, short, or if it is short, short, long, short, short, long. Okay.
And also these are, whether short, long, they're always proportional um to the meter, right? To the rhythm.
Yeah.
So that's why you see it in different, whether it's, eighth note plus 2/16, or is it quarters and halves, these are it's all relative. And lastly, I just want to show for fun, this was actually from our last concert, the concert from our last weekend. We played this Corrette Concert Comique, and in the Adagio movement, here you see these long notes, yeah, so the molossus, which can show seriousness or something dignified, yeah, so slower, more weighted perhaps, and then again the long short pattern representing tenderness. You see also the kind of emphasized through the slurs. In the last movement, it's a kind of it's based actually on a popular song, and it has kind of a country dance feeling to it. So again, this long, the dactyl dum ba da dum bum ba da dum bum 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 ba da dum. That again gives that joyful feel to it. So, of course, this is a vast topic, and we could go on and on. But I just thought to have here a couple of titles of books, which are great resources on the subject of rhythm and affect. It might seem biased that they're all from Indiana University Press, but we're not biased. They just happen to be really good books published by Indiana. Ava, would you like to add anything else, or would you have any other words of wisdom to share with our present and future generation of
Yeah,
musicians?
and so what I would like to say is never make tempo your fixation, is one of the things that I would say. Then also practice your pieces always so that you can do it in different tempos and not just practice it in one tempo, so that you can all the time adjust your playing to the acoustics in which you are playing. You know, that is extremely important, since otherwise all the music gets too fast. You know, so really make sure that you can hear if the acoustics tolerate the tempo that you're playing in. Are you playing in a church? Are you playing in a concert hall? Are you playing in your home? Are you playing in your bathroom? And if you do that, you know, if you play in a place, in a room where there's no acoustics, actually, that is the best way to practice, as then you really have to make your tone as much as you can. But if you then go to your bathroom, then you really know how the sound also can be if you are in a much louder acoustic. So that is really what I would like to say also, that, you know, don't just fix on one tempo, but really be able to be you know, what do you call it in English? I don't know the word for it, but just that you can adjust to the surroundings that you're playing in. And don't make Bach all the time chamber music, but really make him church music.
Thank you, Ava. Any questions on anything that we've talked about? I'll go ahead and read a comment from Emily. Great to be reminded of many things we learned from Ava. So much more information that we could use another of these webinars in the near future. Thank you
Yeah,
so much,
yeah,
Ava. Thank you, Emily.
mhm, yeah. So if she can see it, I still have the artwork on my wall that they gave me at the last workshop. I don't know if you can see it. Can you see the artwork? You see anything? No, huh?
Oh, yeah, I see it. Yeah.
Yeah, that is by Pozzati from Indiana, and that was what Emily and all the participants in the summer workshops gave me at the very end. So I look at it every day. Emily also gave me a beautiful hanging, as she does beautiful weaving. So, and that is in my summer house in Denmark. So I think about you very much, Emily.
Oh, that's very nice to hear. Any other questions? Take your chance here to ask Ava.
Okay, well,
Well, I just want to say thank you so much, Ava, for spending time with
yeah,
us today.
yeah. So,
And
and I just have to say that I have tried in the very beginning to get to be on Facebook, but it simply is too overwhelming for me. You know, and I will try again, as I really would so much like to be in contact with everybody. You know, and all the former students who are here at the panel. You know, I would love to know much more about them. And so Facebook is still really a problem. I will try to see if I can get into it, but otherwise, you know, I really enjoy very much that you all are here, and so for everybody that I know, really wonderful to know that you have been in the same room. So, but as I say, I wished it was here in southern Germany.
well, maybe you'll just have to come back to Teddy Talks Traverso again, if you wouldn't mind.
I would very much like that.
Oh, thank you very much. Other wonderful, lovely comments here from Ellen, refresher, wonderful lecture, and great to have seen you, Eva, Anne Koenig, wonderful, inspiring, sharing many great comments to guide us as always. And um, thank you for connecting us to the earlier generations and the history since the 60s. Yes, I think. Um,
Please send me an email on my old email address.
Yes, yeah, I can if would you like that, Ava? I'd be happy to pass your email on
Yeah, very, very
through
much so.
the to the
Yeah,
registrants here. Okay.
yeah.
That would be, I'm sure people would appreciate that. Um okay. Well, if not anything else,
Legêne is
thank
also
you.
there. Wow.
Elaine, yes.
Legêne, wow.
Okay. Okay.
And Nico was there as well.
Nico was there.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
he had to leave
Wow,
early,
wow.
unfortunately, but thank you so much. Yeah. So once again, thank you all very much for attending and for spending the time here. Ava, with your amazing knowledge and inspirations and also your love for teaching, that's always so inspiring. And I think I can speak for everyone. We're so grateful for that. Again, thank you to our lovely audience here for taking the time, and I hope you've gathered lots of takeaways from this session. If you enjoyed what you've experienced today, consider signing up for my newsletter where I share tips on historical flute playing, as well as announcements regarding upcoming events and workshops. This is a separate mailing from Eventbrite, my newsletter. So for my newsletter, you'll have to go to my website at teddyhuang.com and sign up there. I have one last workshop coming up on June 14th called Playing Beyond Notation, where we look at seemingly easy music. And I hope to show people how to find the magic behind the print. And that'll conclude the 24-25 season here at Teddy Talks Traverso. And I'll return in the fall again with more programs. And I certainly hope that we'll be able to schedule Ava in at a future time.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you for
Wonderful. Thank you.
joining. Okay. Well, then, thank you all so much. Thank you, Ava. Big round of applause. Thank you. And yeah, take care, everyone. And I wish everyone a restful weekend and hope to see you all at another time then. Okay? Take care now, everyone. Bye bye.